Hey, everybody, welcome to episode number 7 of the Debt Free Dad podcast. So you want to pay off debt. So what is the best and the fastest way to make that happen? Today, we're going to be talking about all the different ways, and we're going to be sharing, in our opinion, what is the best way. Stay tuned.
Welcome to the Debt Free Dad podcast, where we're helping normal, everyday people learn how to save money and kick debt so they can live a happier and stress-free life. Now here's your host, Debt Free Dad, Brad Nelson.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's show. You can find me on Facebook, Pinterest, YouTube, and Instagram. Just search Brad Nelson, Debt Free Dad. And we would love to connect with you on any of those social channels. Great start to the show. So, guys, check this out. Valentine's Day is this week, and I always like to share some statistics on our Facebook group page and with people because I think some people just don't really quite realize how much people actually spend on Valentine's Day. But I did this little research here today for today's show. But in 2019, $20.7 billion was spent on Valentine's Day, which comes out to about, I think they said 165, like 165-ish and some change, $165 per shopper, which is breaking the all-time record made back in 2016. I didn't realize it was that much.
I do not spend that much. I don't know about you guys.
If you wait till February 15th, it would have only be half of that.
You know, it's so funny. I posted on our Facebook page and Instagram account a while back ago. I made a card for my wife. I drew a little stick figure. It was like the lamest card. I don't know why I did it, but she's like, out of all the cards I've given her, this is the one she kept. She put it on my desk the other day. And I even made a logo on the back. It was like Sweet Cards LLC or something like that.
Aw, you're so sweet.
I am, aren't I? And anyway, so I posted this and people were commenting. They're like, this is such an awesome idea. And one person had even a better idea. Check out what they do. They go to the store and they snap a picture of the card and text it to the person.
Oh, that is fantastic.
Do you want to know why that's fantastic? If you break down these numbers, listen to this. In 2019, check this out. Greeting cards, out of that $20.7 billion, greeting cards was $1 billion of that. It's crazy.
Wow.
I mean, you think about it. I mean, greeting card, like, unless you go to the dollar store, you know, it's, you know, $4 or $5. Like, if you go to a local Walgreens or something like that, it's expensive. So the point is hopefully you got a plan for Valentine's this year, and you are going to stick to that budget. Nothing wrong with celebrating for Valentine's Day. Just don't go into debt for it. But yeah, I was pretty shocked by that number. $20.7 billion. That's a lot of money, especially just coming off the holidays. You know, I mean, 6-7 weeks after Christmas. I mean, that's a lot of money. So, hey guys, in today's show, we're going to be going through some common methods people are using to get out of debt. And we've used some of these methods, and most of them, honestly, don't really work in our opinion. And only a few have really been proven to be really successful. But a big part of getting out of debt is actually paying it off. And if you choose the wrong approach, that could keep you in debt longer than you have to be, which could cause you to stress out, have more frustration, and it could even cause you to quit and throw in the towel. And we definitely don't want that for you. All three of us have paid off a considerable amount of debt successfully. And the methods that we are sharing have helped not only us, but also have helped thousands of other people save and pay off tens of millions of dollars. So, you know, again, we're sharing kind of a proven recipe as we kind of go throughout this podcast. Start picking up some of these habits and you'll see your finances drastically improve. Now, guys, hey, before we get into some of these tips, can you share real quick, because I mentioned all three of us have paid off a considerable amount of debt. I'll kind of start out, but between my wife and I, before we got married, if you combine the two, even though we paid off our debt separately, but right before we got married, we had both paid off together $78,000 in debt to become debt free. Amber, what were your numbers that you guys paid off?
Ours were over 46,000.
Okay, and you guys did that in how long time?
20 months.
20 months. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and ours was right around the 160,000 mark, and it total right around 8 years total to pay it off.
Okay. All right. So again, a considerable amount of debt. So all three of us have been kind of around the block when it came to some of these, and some of the first ones that we're going to talk about, we've actually tried, very unsuccessfully have tried, and other people have as well. And it's not to say, and there is a little disclaimer before we start today's show. I mean, there's definitely some people that have used some of these that we don't prefer. It's not to say that all of these, it's never going to work. Yes, there are some people that have successfully done some of these that we're not really too excited about. But I think what you'll find, though, is towards the end, there's some much better options that really are going to work in your favor and in helping you pay off that debt as quickly as possible. The first one is probably the most common one, and I'll hear this all the time, well, how are you getting out of debt? Well, I'm just paying more than the minimum on all of my debts, right? And that sounds like a good idea because, you should be making progress. You are paying off more debt, but the negative part of that is that it's a very slow process and you're probably making very slow progress. Along with that, typically I'll hear people also, they're trying to save their first emergency fund. They're trying to save for retirement. They're trying to save for their kids' college. They're trying to pay down debt. And your money only goes so far, and before you know it, you're diluting the efforts. Like it's really hard to make progress when you're trying to focus on everything as opposed to just really getting hyper focused on one thing, right? Did you guys ever try this whole method of just making more than the minimum payments?
I did, because our credit, I don't know how it works with in the US, but in Canada, they started adding our credit cards a statement that showed if you just pay $10 more or $20 more, it'll pay off this much faster. And it showed if you paid your minimum, how much it'll pay off. So we did try that. We tried adding a little bit more, but eventually we needed that a little bit more for other fun things. So that didn't work.
I mean, we definitely did this when we first started this whole process. Well, I wouldn't even say when we started the whole process. I think it was just part of our nature of patting ourselves on the back that we were, we're going to pay off our debt, and so we would pay that extra $50 or $60 extra on all of our cards, and you feel better. But it is just painfully slow. And then when life happens and an emergency happens, you end up just potentially just charging it right back up again.
The next one is moving your debt to a new crib, right? A new house, moving your debt around. So let's talk a little bit about consolidation and balance transfers. You could also kind of throw in debt settlement, which isn't really kind of a consolidation or a transfer. We're not going to really get into too much settlement today. That's, I think, a different situation. And hopefully we'll have another podcast on what debt settlement is. But when it comes to consolidation and balance transfers, the positive in both of these situations is that when you do them, it can feel like you're making progress because it typically, in most cases, frees up money in your monthly cash flow. So a lot of people are in like what I like to call is minimum payment hell. And they may not necessarily have a lot of debt, but they have a lot of accounts. Maybe they have 6, 7, 8 different credit cards. Again, not a huge substantial amount of debt on those credit cards, but the minimum payments are eating up their income. You add on a student loan and a car payment and a mortgage or rent and regular, household utilities and food and groceries. I mean, by the time it's all said and done, there's just not any wiggle room to actually make any impact on your debt. So, the options are decreasing your expenses, increasing your income. Some people don't like to make those choices. So some people may look into, say, debt consolidation. All right. And again, the positive can be that it frees up that income and it relieves the stress pretty quickly. The negative is that I believe that it gives people a false sense of real progress. And here's the thing. I think when it comes to getting out of debt, pain creates change. But when that pain is gone, you're less likely to do anything about the problem. All right. And we've talked about this before on this podcast that, most of what your challenge is really getting over you. You are your worst financial enemy. So unless you are willing to fix and change the habits that have gotten you into your situation to begin with, it's going to be really hard to see any sort of different results. I mean, people will reach out to me and when they're feeling this pain, they're in imminent danger of something, like a paycheck didn't hit, bills are bouncing, they're feeling this immediate pain, they remember hearing me or seeing a podcast, or they're on my email list, whatever it might be, and they send me an email and say, Brad, I need your help. And I get back to them, and a few days later I don't hear back, and then eventually I do hear back, and they say, oh, we took care of it, or that pain is gone, and now all of a sudden they don't want any help. And these are the types of people that live one crisis to the next. So this is why I feel when it comes to consolidation that false sense of progress, removing that pain, it can put you in a worse position, because if you don't change the habits that got you there to begin with, you're just only going to add on more debt. And this happened to me. I've done this, not through a traditional consolidation loan, but through a home equity line of credit, which I basically did the same thing, consolidated a bunch of smaller debts into my house, which is a bad idea in my mind. And I've had lots of other Roots members do the same thing, where they've actually come to me and say, Brad, I've already tried consolidation. Some of it have even gone as far as saying bankruptcy, and it's just not working for them because they're not changing that real problem, which is the bad habits.
I mean, I'm a pro at this. I was a pro at this. I did this for a long time, and very similar to what you described. It's crisis to crisis. It's, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Oh, we did that. Oh, okay. Well, now we just have like a $300 payment on that, and all those other monthly bills went away, and you feel great. But the behavior, who I was, how I treated money, what I thought about money, none of that changed. So I would consolidate it all. I'd have a lower payment for now 5 years. And then, an emergency happened. I need a new car. It's not an emergency, but to me it was. And so, whatever, you would end up using the cards you paid off to then go buy more stuff. And so now you have a consolidated loan, plus you start getting all these credit cards creeping back up on you. And so you're stuck twice as much, because now you got all these cards plus that consolidation loan. So for me, it wasn't until we changed our behaviors. If you're just looking for the quick fix, and you see a lot of these commercials for consolidation of what would you do with an extra $600 a month? And I laugh now, because now I'm thinking, well, you should use it to pay off your debt. But most people are thinking, oh, I could use 600 because then I could buy this, or I could have that.
Yeah.
Well, it's not like free money that they're giving you. I mean, you just took a debt that you could have paid off maybe in a couple of years, and you stretched it over 5 so that you could have extra money to go spend on other stuff.
Yep. Yeah, you hit on a big one with this consolidation stuff. I mean, this stuff is heavily marketed. I mean, you'll see this in the mail, you'll see it on TV, you'll see it in your email inbox, you'll see it on the internet, you'll see it on social media. I mean, it is everywhere now. I mean, and when you see it that much, you just begin to think, oh, well, that's got to be the best way, because I see it all over the place. Consolidation is what I should be doing. So again, for some people, consolidation, and I've talked to people where consolidation did work, but at the same time, I've also heard from a lot of other people where consolidation just got them into more and more problems. So our advice to you is stay away from consolidation, and I think we've got some better options for you here later on the show. Let's talk a little bit about balance transfers when it comes to credit cards. Again, very similar to kind of a traditional consolidation loan, is this idea of getting a 0% balance transfer credit card, where you can maybe say take a couple of different credit cards, transfer all those balances to the 0%. You save on interest over a period of time, and like Ryan kind of used, it's like the idea is that you take that extra money and you pay off the debt, but how often does that really happen? And that's kind of the same situation. This gives you, again, that false sign of real progress. It's essentially just putting a Band-Aid on a bad wound and kind of covering it up, and it's easy to ignore it because that pain, it goes away. Also, when it comes to these balance transfers and even consolidation loans in general, you do want to be careful, especially when it comes to the consolidation. If we bounce back to that one, and we didn't hit on this, but when it comes to consolidations, it could potentially cost you more money than, say, keeping the higher interest rate accounts that you have open, because all they're essentially doing is taking all of that, consolidating into one lower payment, giving you maybe a lower interest rate, but then they're spreading that term out for a much longer period of time, which helps you lower your payments. Again, they're not taking any debt away. They're just moving it to a different house and reorganizing it for you and giving you a different payment in different terms. But what you might be surprised is when you actually look at the actual math of the deal, you might find in more times than not that consolidation loan is going to cost you more money in financing than, say, keeping your other accounts and just working through that with some different methods that we're going to share with you here later in the show. But going back to that balance transfer, I don't absolutely hate this idea, guys. I think, for some people, it can work, but you've got to be really, really, really careful and have a good plan going into it. I just wouldn't go into this all willy-nilly. I would have a good, solid plan. If I'm going to do this, I am going to diligently make sure that I am going to pay this thing off or get rid of it, get rid of the other cards, but get rid of the distractions or do whatever I've got to do to make sure that situation doesn't turn into a worse situation. And that's what I find too often is that most people go into it, they just don't have a good plan, and it ends up biting them.
Yeah, I mean, I've done it. I had the best of intentions when it came to this. I got it in the mail, 0% interest, 12 months. Oh my gosh, let's transfer all my balance over. And I did it, and I had the best of intentions. I'm going to pay this off. This is what I'm going to do. And then life happened, and I didn't pay it off, and I used the credit card I just paid off with that one. So now I had two. So I don't like it. Yeah. I don't like it at all. Yeah. I would say just stay away from it, period. Because it just makes you feel like you've done something worthwhile. But in the end, it could come and bite you in the butt.
A lot of times too, and I learned this through balance transfers. And so if my wife were here, she would tell some really funny stories about how I'm really bad with salespeople because I will buy a lot of stuff. But a lot of times you get these offers. I mean, I used to get these offers all the time when we had credit card debt. I mean, every week I would get balance transfer offers. So just think of the hundreds of millions of dollars they're probably spending to mail these out to their customers. But a lot of times you would call and they can't transfer the whole balance. So now they're going to sell you why you should do it. And if you're not great at saying no, you could end up transferring half your balance to a new card. And now you got half of a balance on one card and half of a balance on a new card. And you didn't really solve a problem. You created more of a monster. So be careful when you get these offers, because it's a wolf in sheep's clothing. A lot of time a lot of times they're not just like, sure, we'll transfer the whole thing. It just depends on your credit, depends on a lot of things. And a lot of times for us, they were never willing to transfer the whole thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a big one too. And mentioning, I'm glad you brought up the credit score, because I do want to bring that up. I mean, some of these options may or may not be available to you simply just based on your credit history. And, if you're trying to transfer balances to a new card because you're behind in payments and things like that, the likelihood of you getting some of these really great introductory offers on some of these balance transfer cards probably isn't all that good if you don't have good credit. I mean, some of these really good deals are only reserved for, the best of the best. So keep that in mind too as you're going through and doing the research. We'll be back. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with some two of the most popular ways to pay off debt. We're going to kind of go through and debate which one might be better for you. Stay tuned. Hey, if you love planners, this is for you. Do you know why planners frustrate me, though? Because they only get it half right. Now, sure, they're really fancy at helping you manage your time, which is really important, obviously, but where they get it wrong is money. Now, I believe that there are two important resources that you need to have control of in your life to have success. One is time, and the other one is your money. And most planners don't include any financial planning, and that's frustrating. Things like keeping track of paydays and when bills are due, spending habits, yearly expenses, budgets, cash flow planning, debt elimination plans, goal planning. These things are a real pain in the butt, because then you have to create your own. And who has time for all that? So instead, what happens for most of us? Nothing. We tend to ignore our finances even more, and things only get worse. Well, that can all end today. I am so excited to announce the release of my brand new, totally awesome debt freedom planner here this year. Now, before you say, Brad, I already have a planner. Now, I'm going to here to tell you that this is not an ordinary day planner. This debt freedom planner is a companion tool that works with your day planner to help you save more money, pay off debt, and melt away financial stress. This is the tool that we've all been waiting for. Also, if you're not a paper person, maybe you love spreadsheets or electronic versions, we've got a digital version available to you as well. So head on over to the realdebtfreedad.com, click on the Debt Freedom Planner in the menu at the top of the page, get all those details and to order your very own Debt Freedom Planner today. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. Today we're talking about the best ways and the fastest ways to pay off your debt. And the next two are by far probably the most popular two methods, and also always up for a great debate in the financial industry. Heck, even, and we haven't even mentioned the two, but even between like financial coaches and financial experts, and I'm part of some Facebook groups where there's a lot of people who are in the financial industry, and we'll get on this topic. It's amazing how split it is when it comes to these two methods and which one's the best one. And I'm always up for a great debate. I think they're a lot of fun. And today, when it comes to these two methods, and we're going to share this with you, no matter what method you choose, I think the key is that you just got to make sure that you're doing it. I think that's the biggest key. And that's where I find too many people are making the mistake. They'll debate their ideas, to the death about which one's the best way. But then I'll ask them, well, how well are you paying off your debt? How's that working out for you? Well, not so good, because I'm still working on my behavior and all that other stuff. And it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't be debating on this then. So the first one I want to talk about is the debt avalanche. And this is a very popular method where you take all of your debts and you list them in the order of highest interest rates, or highest interest rates to lowest interest rates. So essentially you want to pay down your debts with the highest interest rates first. And the idea is that by doing so, you are going to be paying off more interest. And it is true, mathematically speaking, this method is likely going to save you the most money. If not, it's almost certain that it's going to save you the most money in interest, because mathematically speaking, it works out better than the other method, which we're going to share, which is the debt snowball method. But the big thing is there's a big if, all right? And I think there's probably a lot of people out there who experience a lot more burnout using this method, because depending on what your debts look like, if you follow this method, your first debt could be a substantial debt, and it could be a big amount that you got to pay off. And if you're like one of those people that I was mentioning earlier, where you're in minimum payment hell, and essentially every dollar that you have is going just to make minimum payments, it's going to be pretty hard to make some headway and start to see some progress earlier on as you get started, to paying off some of these debts. Like, say, for instance, let me give you an example here. Let's say your first debt in this situation, let's say your first debt is a credit card. And let's say that credit card has, 17, 18, 19, 20% interest rate on it, whatever it might be, but it's high. All right. And that's the highest interest rate that you have in your total amount of debt. And let's say it's a $4,500 debt. And let's say you can only send $100 to $200 a month in payments to that debt, because that's all your monthly budget will allow. I mean, you think about that, $4,500 debt, I'm only able to send $100 to $200 a month to that debt. That's going to take a long time for you to finally be able to check off that you paid that off. All right. And that's where this kind of behavior and this human side comes into this, because as humans, at least in me personally, I like to make progress. I like to see that I'm moving in the direction that I want to move in. And if I'm not seeing that progress, and it's very slow and mundane, and I'm not able to celebrate really any major success, I'm probably going to throw in the towel. And that is my biggest argument against the avalanche method.
When I first started your program and doing the debt snowball method, I actually admittedly looked into the avalanche. I was like, no, there's got to be a better way. And I think I might have brought it up to you, but after looking at it, and then I'm like, no, I'm just going to trust the process. And paying off, I think our lowest one was like, I don't know, around $500. Paying that off first and just being able to shout that out and like, oh, we paid it off. And then eventually we cut it up. That felt so good to just do that I was like, okay, I'm just going to keep this snowball thing going on.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that snowball one here in just a minute. Ryan, did you guys try anything with the interest rates?
Yeah, I would say no. I would say early on in the process, we didn't really know what we were doing. So we were just kind of throwing mud at the wall.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I think the avalanche method, it just depends. I mean, everybody's situation is different. I mean, if you're not living paycheck to paycheck, maybe you've got a couple debts to clear up, and it makes a lot of, I mean, it definitely makes a lot of sense if for the right people. If you're the kind of person that you could benefit from this, like you have additional money to put towards a debt that maybe someone who's living paycheck to paycheck can't, then I think this will mathematically work in your favor.
Absolutely.
And it is a good way to do it. I wouldn't say to not do this, but I'd say for the majority of people who especially are tuning in for help and are looking for help, they're not looking at it from that perspective. You know, they're just trying to figure out, how do I make progress? How do I get something going?
Yeah, totally agree. And like I said, I'm not a huge fan of the method. And again, I'm not a huge fan because I tried it, I attempted it, and I burned out because I wasn't seeing progress, and I just thought it wasn't working. I wasn't getting to where I wanted to go, and I quit. So I was like, well, the avalanche method doesn't work for me, and that's when I kind of got led on to the other method we're going to talk about, which is the debt snowball method. And a lot of people know the debt snowball method. It was made popular, obviously, by Dave Ramsey and his radio show, and his books and his company, but it was actually introduced back in the early 90s. And I'm not even sure if Larry Burkett invented it, but Larry Burkett was kind of one of the first people who started talking about it and teaching the debt snowball back in the early 90s. And Dave kind of took it more mainstream with his radio show and all that kind of stuff. And that's what made it really, really popular over the years. Instead of, you're going to list your debts, but instead of listing your debts by highest interest rate to lowest interest rate, you're going to list your debts by lowest balance owed to highest balance owed. And the idea behind the debt snowball is you work on the smallest balances first, allowing you to get those quick and early wins. And I think one of the big positives to this method is, again, it plays on that human side. I know, Ryan, I don't know, did you just mention this, or I think we talked about this earlier before the podcast started, was that the whole math thing. You know, I mean, if you were doing math to begin with, you probably wouldn't be in the situation right. that you're in, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you I mean, I think that's, and we used to do this. I mean, I used to make these really fancy spreadsheets, and I would have all our money listed, and I could tell you where everything was going, and I was massively in debt. It's like, you know, just because I'm great at math, I mean, I can't, you know, I'm sitting here spouting all these like, well, it makes more sense math-wise this and math-wise that, and yet I'm sitting here paying all this interest on credit cards and I'm in debt. So for us, it's about, you know, making the progress, getting out of that mindset of thinking you've got it all figured out or you know best from a mathematical standpoint.
Yeah, right. And I think, you know, and reversing that psychology a little bit and being able to, like Amber said, you know, check off those wins, check off the fact that you paid off something, I think goes a lot farther than just saving money on the interest. I get that, you know, mathematically, yes, it's going to cost you more money to do the debt snowball, but if in the long run you complete it and you actually pay off all your debt, in most situations, I think I'm willing to have that expense or have that additional cost to actually see the finish line.
And again, nothing against the avalanche method for people that have used it and have been successful, but it's, if you look at that and say, well, it's going to cost me more money to do the snowball method, like with the avalanche method, if you do that wrong or you mess up or you bail, you're going to end up costing you a lot more money on the avalanche method than if you could stick with the snowball method. And I think that's the key here is, there is no 100% this way or that way. You may want to try both. You may find that you're successful with one or the other. I think most people are successful in the snowball area who are really struggling that paycheck to paycheck lifestyle.
Yep. Yeah, unless you come from that financial background, have that kind of nerdy side to you, right? I think most people are going to probably be on the snowball method or that spectrum as well. And I mean, we've seen this before. I mean, just coaching people in Roots, like there's been a lot of people that have come to me and said, Brad, it's crazy to even say this to you, but doing the snowball, I have become addicted to paying off debt. Like, I just love paying it off. I love seeing the results. I love seeing the progress. And that's all part of this whole behavior change and how it moves into this whole, you know, paying off your debt. Also, there's now science that's starting to prove that this method could be best too. And according to the Harvard Business Review, and I'm going to share this link in the show notes as well if you want to check it out, but this is what they say. This is just a little excerpt from this article. They say, we tested a variety of hypotheses and ultimately determined that it is not the size of the repayment or how little is left on a card after a payment that has the biggest impact on people's perception of progress. Rather, it's what portion of the balance they succeed in paying off. Thus, focusing on paying down the account with the smallest balance tends to have the most powerful effect on people's sense of progress, and therefore their motivation to continue paying down their debts. This aligns with our other research on the power of a small win to keep people motivated. So again, when I start seeing scientific studies and research kind of that shows that there's more of this behavior stuff behind these methods of getting out of debt, it's just hard for me to ignore that research. And again, like we've been talking about, you got to pick which one's going to be best for you. Negatives of the Snowball, it is going to cost you more money in the long run. But positives, heck, you're actually going to finish it. And that's the key, is getting you to the point where you can finish it. As we started out this podcast, we all shared how much debt we've all paid off. And I think we can all agree. I know, Amber, you use the Snowball method. Ryan, you use the Snowball method too, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, between, the three of us, I mean, you're talking, several hundred thousands of dollars in debt paid off using that Snowball method. So, again, there are some ideas for you today in today's show to help you pay down your debts faster. Again, our recommendation is to stay away from some of those quick fixes that, are kind of spread by marketing out there. Yes, they work for some, but in my experience, not as many as, you would hope. And I think you're going to have a lot more progress with either choosing the avalanche method or the debt snowball method.
Hey, what's this I see? I thought this was a party! Let's dance!
Hey guys, Kevin Bacon means it's time to do some celebrations of the show, and we've got about 5 or 6 celebrations we're going to do with you here today. We've got some good ones that we're going to share. The first one comes from Chantel Perrone. She has been in Roots Personal Finance for about 3 years, which is crazy. Amber, we were just kind of talking about this. It's shocking to know. Just think about that. It's been 3 years already since she's joined. She's just been having some amazing success with practicing some of the stuff that we're talking about. But today's celebration is using the planner. I went through and figured out all of my annual expenses that we have and that we usually just manage to fit in the budget, and instead we planned ahead for them. We set up savings accounts for each expense, and we'll be putting money in monthly to cover them instead of figuring it out when it just comes up. And that's what we were talking about by establishing back in episode number 6 with that emergency fund. We brought up sinking funds. Sinking funds can be a game changer. So good for you, Chantel. I think you're going to find that that's going to be really helpful for you.
And we have Rochelle Baker. She's celebrating. She says, just did some shopping for our son's birthday on the 21st. Bought a Batman Batcave at the secondhand store for $3 and a Beyblade set in the clearance section of Canadian Tire for $12 instead of $50. Also, brought my lunch to work every day this week.
Heck yeah, way to go, Rochelle. Wow. That is fantastic. That is awesome. The Batcave for $3. That's a good deal. I love that.
Next, we have Jerry Joe Marshall. Paid off $1,200 this week.
Wow.
Plus all bills paid for the month minus the truck and phone bill. That will be paid this week. I love reading updates from people when they're planning what to do with their money.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, $1,200 in a week. That is a substantial amount. Good for you, Jerry Joe. I love that. Justin Pops added an extra $50 to their emergency fund and a $50 to a savings account. So good for you. Again, small wins, but they are fantastic. It's all those small little steps that make up the big wins over time. So good for you.
Mm-hmm, definitely. And Leanne Louise added another $1,000 to her emergency fund.
Crucial.
Yeah.
It is. That is awesome. $1,000 to their emergency fund. Again, we've talked about this plenty of times on the show. Such a game changer. So good for you, Leanne. Congratulations to all of you who are working so hard. Awesome celebrations this week. Hey, that sound means it's time for the question of the show. And if you have a question about your finances, send me an email, brad@therealdebtfreedad.com, and we will do our best to get your question on an upcoming episode of the Debt Free Dad podcast. So the question today kind of falls, and why we're including this, kind of falls in line with the topic that we were covering here today. She says, "Hey Brad, I am paying off my debt using the debt snowball method. I have two debts that have very similar balances due, only separated by about $300. However, the higher of the two has the highest interest rate. She's asking, would it be okay to flip these two and pay off the highest interest rate first?" And obviously, this would kind of go against the debt snowball method that we just described by paying the lower balance off first. And I kind of like to call this the hybrid of the snowball and the avalanche method. And I think personally, I think it's totally okay in this situation to do the flip. And if it's only separated by a few $100s and you can make it work, I think looking at the math, I think that totally makes sense, especially when you're seeing a huge difference in the interest rates. Now, the only time I would advise against this is if it's a substantial amount that's different. I'll have members who will come to me and they'll ask me about this, and instead of a few hundred, it's several thousands of dollars. And going through their cash flow and looking at how long it's going to take them, it's not always in their best interest to flip it, even though it may save them a little bit of money in the long run, just because it's going to take them so much longer. So again, when we do one-on-one coaching calls, we're able to kind of look at their details and, or look at all of their information in a lot more detail and really kind of give some more fine-tuned advice. So if you have questions in regards to that, feel free to reach out to us again at brad@therealdebtfreedad.com. We'll be happy to give you some information. But yes, in some cases, it does make sense to do the flip. Even if you are completely dedicated to doing that debt snowball approach, there is nothing wrong with that. Hey everyone, thanks for hanging out with us today. We love your feedback, and it also helps us grow our podcast. So please leave us an honest review in Apple Podcasts. We read every single one of those. And as you know, the Debt Free Dad podcast is here to help you live a happier and stress-free financial life. So if you know someone who could benefit from our show, please give us a share. We would greatly appreciate that. We appreciate you, and we will see you on an upcoming episode. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Debt Free Dad podcast. For more free resources to kick debt and financial stress, head over to therealdebtfreedad.com.